If there's anything I miss from comics of yore, it's the days when you had fanzines, or even if they weren't done by fans, they were magazines about comics with interviews and all the rest of the stuff that the internet has since replaced. One of those magazines was Amazing Heroes, which was published by Fantagraphics from, I don't know, about 1982 or so until it finally went the way of the dodo in the early 90s somewhere. This was sort of the mainstream version of the Comics Journal. Not exactly, but it had interviews, reviews, comic strip reprints, that kind of stuff. The stuff that the Comics Journal was way too snobby to touch on. Kim Thompson was one of the editors of this magazine for some period of time. I bought a whole stack of these things, either on an eBay auction for dirt cheap 20 years ago, or maybe a back issue bin of a store that was going out of business or something. I don't remember. But I have a stack, and I've been going through these lately and having a lot of fun. And I'm not going to go through every page of every issue, but I do want to highlight some issues and some pages therein. So this is issue 38 from January 1st, 1984. So we're getting to 84 here, which means it was actually published late 83. But I just have a few markers in here. Let's take a look at what's in here. First, they did some cover parodies in the magazine as part of the regular features. And this one, Nick Fury, Agent of Smurf. How can you not love that? I mean, yeah, Smurfette's a little wonky looking, but that Dum Dum Dugan Smurf is awesome. You can never have enough good Smurf stuff. And here they have the coming distractions, as they call them, the comics that are coming out that month, I guess. Cerebus the Aardvark number 57, with a backup story featuring Normal Man by Valentino. That's Jim Valentino, who would later go on to help form Image Comics. This is a fun ad in here. Geppi's comic subscription service. Yes, the predecessor, I suppose, to Diamond Comics Distributors. He had 8 great reasons why you would choose Geppi's comic subscription service. Let's go through them now. A free plastic bag for each comic ordered. A free copy of the 1984 Overstreet Price Guide if you order just 480 books a year. That sounds like a lot, I'm sure, but it probably really isn't if you break that down by month, by week. If you're a regular comic reader, that's super easy to get up to. I'm just trying to picture back in 1983, 84, the process by which he added those numbers up. Because we didn't really have spreadsheets yet. Yeah, there were sort of very primitive versions of spreadsheets, but he probably had a big book with lots of lines. And they had those pre-printed books back in those days that were the paper spreadsheets. It's tough to imagine if you're, especially under the age of, say, 40, that you've ever seen such a thing in your life, but he must have tracked it somehow, or his people tracked it somehow, and that had to be impressive. Number 3, instant credit. Number 4, credit card purchases are welcome. That was probably a bigger selling point back then than it would be today. Credit cards were still not necessarily new, but they weren't as regularly used as they are today, to be honest. Lowest shipping charges available, foreign rates available, largest selection available from Archie, DC, Eclipse, First, Marvel, Pacific, Whitman, and more. But those were your big publishers back then. DC, Marvel, Archie, Eclipse, Pacific, Whitman, and others. Number 7, fast, accurate, and dependable service. And number 8, wholesale prices were available with large orders. There you go. There's your beginning of Diamond Comics. But the other point of this there's 2 points. One is that if you wanted to place your order, I guess you ripped this page out of the magazine, and then you had to, tick off the boxes or check off by the lines here. That page is really small. You better have a very fine point pen to do that with. If you're using a fountain pen, it's just going to bleed all over the place. This paper it's newsprint, folks. It's amazing to see these are all the comics that came out in a month. We could probably fit that in the same space with today's comics, except you'd have to double it for all the variant covers. The other thing that is fun for me to read is this list of fan magazines here. These are the magazines that you could buy at the comic shop or at your subscription service, your mail order place right now, including straight from Amazing Heroes. I'm having a tough time reading this because the print is so small and I'm a man of a certain age now. Bondage. Oh, James Bond. Oh boy, yeah, almost went a different direction there. Comic Book Price Guide Update, Comic Fandoms Forum, Comic Informer, Comic News, Comic Reader, Comics Collector, Comics Feature, Comics Interview, which is another great magazine that I have some samples of from, I think, the mid to late 80s. Maybe I'll get to some of those someday. Comics Journal, of course. Comics Scene, which was one of the early magazines I was starting to read when I first got into comics in 1989. What else is there? Enterprise Incidents, which I imagine is a Star Trek one. Fanfare, Fantico Chronicles. I can't even read past that. Golden Age of Comics. It's getting so tiny, I just can't read. But that's the list of magazines you could get back then. And I just miss magazines. I know, we have the internet now. Everything's more immediate. Everything's easier. Podcasts are better than reading interviews. I get it. Here's an ad for the official Marvel Comics tryout book, which debuted, I think, in 1983. But the winner to the official Marvel Comics tryout book contest, which included a contract with Marvel Comics, wasn't announced, I think, until like 1986. And famously, Mark Bagley won that for pencils. Doug Hazelwood won it for inking. He would ink Bagley on a lot of stuff back in those days. And do you remember who the letterer who won it was? I do, because I'm a lettering geek. It was Robin Riggs, who is not really a letterer. He's an inker. He went on to ink, that I can think of off the top of my head, the one sample that I know of that he did was inking over Leonard Kirk on the Supergirl comic in the mid to late 90s, which was a great comic. This is an interesting 2-page little essay, The Day I Called Fred Hembeck by Mark Waid. I should find out if Mark Waid still owns the rights to this, and we should probably just read this thing out loud, because it's a really funny story about a young Mark Waid stumbling over himself to call Fred Hembeck to ask him about a storyline, basically. Because back then, that's what you did, folks. You didn't email them. You didn't slide into their DMs. You had to actually call them. Sorry, I'm feeling old today. Comics in Review. This is your monthly, or semi-monthly, because this book did eventually go twice a month, this series. The review columns are fun to read because they mince no words. This is sort of the Comics Journal-like approach to superhero comics, but slightly kinder. I just like the headline here for Atari Force number 1, Son of Pac-Man. And believe it or not, he actually liked that book. And finally, in Amazing Readers, the letters column, which you'll recognize a lot of the names in this column if you look at it on a consistent basis, but Bo Smith is in here a lot. T.M. Maple has some letters in here. Some other old-timers, names you'd recognize, will show up in here. This made me laugh. A perverse comic from Frank Duke Logan. I mean, that guy from West Virginia, of course. Frank Duke Logan. I wonder if he knows Bo Smith or knew him back then, because Bo, I'm pretty sure, was out of West Virginia at that point. Look at that. Barbersville, West Virginia. He's got a letter on the next page. Go figure. But he didn't like this issue of Amazing Heroes, which focused on American Flagg, Howard Chaykin's classic comic that we all know and love so much. Let me just read this letter to you, because it's kind of fun. This letter concerns itself with your article, Rally Round the Flag by Peter Sanderson in Amazing Heroes. I cannot believe that Amazing Heroes would glorify a perverse comic book like American Flagg by placing him on the cover. Again, there's the cover. They did. Is he perverse? Did they glorify it? That's up to the reader. We'll continue with the letter here. I was duped into buying the first issue of American Flagg by a fellow collector. As I read the first issue, I was surprised and disgusted with Howard Chaykin's overuse of bad language and sexual overtones. Oh boy, would he hate comics today, this guy. It seems that Amazing Heroes and Mr. Chaykin have stooped to new lows to try to sell magazines. Mr. Chaykin insists that he is flamingly patriotic. Well, from the looks of American Flagg, it appears that Mr. Chaykin has no pride in his country. Those kind of people we Americans don't need. This, of course, I should mention, is especially funny and ironic, given that Chaykin they attempted to cancel Chaykin from the left, not the right, a couple of years ago. Continuing on. Sometimes I think that the comic book business is going right down the tubes. What happened to good comics like Sergeant Fury, Classics Illustrated, and Kid Colt? Wait, was Kid Colt the one that Marvel turned gay 15 years ago, or is that the other Western character? Boy, this guy I hope is not still reading comics. I have heard that Amazing Hero sales have not been good. If you want to keep me as a reader, I suggest that you stick to good comics and not back alley gutter trash like American Flagg. Needless to say, I beg to differ with Mr. Logan. I think it's actually a really great comic. Maybe it helps that I read it as an adult and not as the 7-year-old I would have been when it came out the first time, but there you go. Letters like that in 1983-84, God, you just don't hear people arguing about comics being un-American and gutter trash today, do you? Thank goodness for that, huh? Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. Love and Rockets on the back cover. That is Amazing Heroes number 38 from January 1st, 1984. Lots of fun and games in there. I'll have more to look at in future videos. If you like this, if you want to see more of these magazine reviews in which I don't go page by page because that would just be too long and boring, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell, all that good stuff. The stuff that YouTubers beg you to do. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you again real soon.